Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started with our department hearings. We have a pretty full agenda today. We have the Convention Center Authority, Mayor's Office, Department of Finance, Codes Administration, as well as General Services and Fleet Management. So we are going to start with Mr. Charles Starks, who's the President and CEO, as well as Heidi Runyon, who's the Director of Finance and Administration for the Convention Center Authority. And I will turn it over to you, Mr. Starks.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. And so on behalf of the Convention Center Authority, I'd like to just take a few minutes and kind of walk you through last year and what we see for the coming year. This can be very brief. Last year, no business to speak of, so didn't have a whole lot with the pandemic. I will say, though, some of the things we've been able to do this past year, which are a real testament to our team and some of the others that we've worked with, is, as all of you know, members of the council, we've been really proud and to help the health department with the vaccination clinic and what's been going on there as they wrap up this week. So if you have not got your second shot yet of Pfizer, you still have till Friday. So please get in there and see the good folks with the health department. We've also been able to host a number of local metro meetings and things there, and certainly the council's been there with us. So thank y'all, and see you again in another week or so. So we have kept busy with things of that nature while at the same time having some small events. So it's not been a total loss for the year, but when I get to some numbers in a moment, you'll see there's not been a whole lot that's happened this year. And then I'll talk shortly here in just a moment about what the future looks like, which certainly looks much better than what we've just witnessed. So in front of you, we just dropped an easy handout for you. Certainly if you have questions afterwards, after you have a chance to review this, in addition to what you have today, we're happy to answer those or entertain those. I'd like to just kind of start out on page 3 of the handout real quick that y'all have in front of you. And I really want to talk about, we can talk about what cancellations look like during COVID, which was the same across the country. And as I just alluded to a little bit, operations has been not a whole lot going. I really want to just focus for just a moment on future bookings to talk a little bit about what our future looks like. We're going to talk about numbers that for fiscal 22 are not promising. They're improving, but not promising, and we'll continue to see some improvement in short-term sales and certainly some conventions coming. But what's interesting is during this time in May, as we get into May, is that our future booking business is extremely strong. December was the best month in the history of the Convention Center Authority in booking future forward-looking conventions. So right in the middle of this, before we got started vaccinating folks, we had the very best month we've had in our history, which is now over 11 years with the authority. We've been going. So we currently have business on the books contracted out through 2033, proposals out as far as 2043. Yes, people do plan that far in advance, and so we're working with a lot of groups out into the future. So what I can tell you is that we get through the next 18 to 24 months, we're kind of back to normal in what we're doing, and the future is incredibly bright. So not concerned about the long term, just the short term we got to look through just a little bit. One of the things that we spend a lot of time with, that's on the next page of your document, is getting information and research from various sources, and what they're looking at is a general consensus, the convention recovery for large group meetings. Most all are saying we could expect to see that back to the levels, and kind of as the base year for our industry is 2019. What did you see in 2019, which is the last full year of operations for any of the hotels or convention centers around the country? Is that we can anticipate sometime in mid to late 23 that we will see, and that's calendar 23, so that we will see that return to those 2019 number levels. So we're still a few years in growing this back, as I said, 18 to probably 24 months. As we look at that, that research hasn't changed a whole lot. While we have seen, and y'all get from us each week how the hotel stats are looking, we're certainly seeing a dramatic uptick in leisure activity in the hotels. So they're able to fill Fridays and Saturdays pretty easily right now, or close to easily, maybe not quite at the rate they were having before. But Sunday through Wednesday, Thursday's a little better than a Wednesday, but that continues to be a struggle for them, and that's typically when convention groups would fill in. So they're certainly looking for groups to start coming back. We certainly take our social responsibility and what we do in the community very important. So just a few things that we've done as we continue to do. A lot of these have been in place, and we continue each year just working with them. The one this past year was being accredited with GBAC, which is looking at all of our cleanliness standards and how we clean the building, disinfection, and what we're doing. in order to be ready for customers and folks as they come in to be in a safe environment. So very proud of that accreditation that we earned now almost a year ago. So as we're trying to bring groups into the building. And then we also, as you know, spend a lot of time, and some of y'all have heard me say before, what we've invested in the community. And in this last fiscal year for us, one of the things that we did since we saw you last was we did donate money back at the outset of the tornado last March from the authority, and then also into the hospitality workers and general employment needs around COVID back last March. We made a $500,000 contribution to that effort to try to help people that were, as you know, in the hospitality industry, which has been pretty devastated through the virus and the pandemic. A lot of those folks lost their job overnight. So a couple of things our board approved that we're very proud to talk about as we invest. And then always share with you the payments and the contributions we've made to Metro. You can see from the chart there, the information, is that as the increase that y'all approved and passed on the property tax improvement, that for the MOU that we have with Metro will result in an additional $4 million that we've already transferred to Metro. So our pilot agreement was worth $16.6 million this past year as that moves forward. So and that money's already been sent over to many months ago, actually, now to Metro. So get into just real quick some operating revenues and expenses, and I won't spend just a couple of minutes on this. Really, the focus for us as we look at 22 is, number one, the number of groups that have canceled and what they're seeing coming in. But we talk an awful lot in our industry and in our jargon of talk about materialization rates and how likely is a group to materialize, in essence, to come to the city. You know, one of the things that typically is rounded into that number is what the attendance rates will be. So this year, Heidi has broken out, and you can see on the chart that we've broken out what materialization as opposed to what attendance projections are. We've got 7 groups, pardon me, coming between the middle to end of June to the end of July right now. As a general rule, I can tell you that the groups that are coming, on average, are coming at about 40% of their normal attendance numbers. Now, we've got a couple that are coming at 100%, others not quite as well, but we're seeing through this first 6 weeks or so of groups starting to come back. So think about, we're going to have a group in the building, but they're going to basically be about 40% of the people there that would have been there historically with that group. That continues to seem to be the pace for the first few months, and then as we take it out through the rest of 22, we kind of evaluate those numbers, and then that continues as we see it moving up a little bit. Now, pardon me, we continue to see cancellations and groups that are postponing. Just had another one just recently. You can imagine that international travel, which is just non-existent at this point, and I think probably unbeknownst to most people, when a convention's coming to town, any type of national convention coming to Nashville, it is a rare occurrence that it doesn't have an international component. Most don't think of the American Association of XYZ as having international attendees. Well, they're just being correct in that. They all do. And so a number of the shows we got in July, one has a 30% international attendance. Well, they're getting 0 there. Another one's got almost 40%. They're seeing 0. So international attendance, we don't see rebounding at all until we get into calendar 22. Excuse me, and then even then it'll be a question as to how strongly that comes back. From an expense standpoint, we're continuing to be, pretty frugal in what we're doing. We are starting to ramp back up, bringing staff back on board. We were fortunate to keep all of our staff employed during this time, but we had a number of openings anyway, and we have a few more. As the entire hospitality industry is faced with right now is just the worker shortage, and what we're all trying to do to get more staff in. We're in a much better place than some of our colleagues are, but that will continue to be a little bit of a strain as we get open back up and get in the numbers. And then kind of lastly, where do we end up, or where do we see us ending up for fiscal 21, which is really the purpose of our report today, is we're going to project right now about an $18 million operating loss for fiscal 21. That will be the first time in our history that's occurred. Certainly given what it was. I will tell you that we went into this year, because our budgets were done pre-COVID, we had an estimated revenue budget of $52 million. We're right now projecting that'll be about $4 million. So to give you an idea of what the COVID impact was just operationally, in addition to that, multiply in hotel taxes and other fees that we receive. So about an $18 million loss. And then for our fiscal 22 budget, our board has now approved, is a little over a $12 million operating loss. Overall, that's closer to a $15 million operating loss, which is on the very last slide. I'll share with you. This will be the first time in our existence that we've had to dip into reserves, just basically to pay the mortgage. And so our bond payments, we're having to dip into there. Now, in reality, that's why we've had rainy day funds. That's why we've set money aside. We have a bond reserve account that Tom over here would certainly know very well about. We've not had to touch any of that. Our bond holders are extremely pleased with where we are. But normally operations and revenue sources have been able to cover that and never have to dip into it. So this year's an exception to that. But again, that's why we were prudent in what we did and our board approved. And so we still maintain an operational reserve as well. So there's no alarms for us at all. But just to tell you, that's kind of what this year has kind of led us to. So just in closing, thank you all for certainly all the support and all the work we've all done together during this time. And you know, we're pleased to certainly be a small part in what we've done with vaccinations and other things. I'm glad we never had to build that hospital that we'd started building back a year ago. So, you know, those kind of things didn't in our way. And the team at the Music City Center is ready to start welcoming all those folks back. So everybody at home, the people with little funny tags that they walk around their neck, be really nice to them, okay? Because they're really nice to all of us. So we want them to have a great time, and we know they will when they get to Nashville. So, Madam Chair, that concludes certainly any opening comments, and happy to take any questions anyone may have. Thank you.
Councilman Druffel.
Yeah, Charles, thanks for all you do. Being in the hospitality business, you definitely have a tremendous amount of respect from all of us. We are in the positive territory in terms of debt payback, in terms of, I think, didn't we have about $100 million in excess?
Yeah.
How's that projecting out over the next 2 years with some of the loss?
Yeah, Tom, or Councilman Druffel, we see that at our low point right now, as we look at that, it's now excluding, let me say, we've got, when you look at how much cash we got in the bank is one thing compared to what by policy we have to reserve. So we still are funding a 9-month full budgeted operating reserve fund out of that. So that's deducted first. At our low point over this, we see over the next 18 months is that we would still be at about $35 million positive in addition to our operating reserve fund. So we're on solid ground. I mean, there's not a question about that as we look forward with a fully funded operational reserve and a fully funded bond reserve.
But we'll never have to cut back into finding other sources of income you don't anticipate in the next couple of years.
No, not unless, you know, goodness forbid that something else were to happen with a pandemic or extend. No, sir, not at all. No, not at all.
Our history, you never know what's going to happen these days.
That's true, yeah.
And officially recognize you sort of underplay your community effort. I chair the advisory board for TSU's hospitality program, and Charles has been on the board and active with the high schools for 15 years in the academy. So thanks for all you do. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilman.
Councilwoman Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One quick question about the projections of future meetings. Is there talk about what meetings might become virtual meetings now instead of in-person meetings? Does the industry think people are ready to move on from that, or that it's going to make a permanent dent?
Yeah, great question, Council Lady Allen. What all the research is showing now, and part of that led to some of our work here. I only just gave you the summary sheet there. is it's interesting to watch the trend lines over the last 6 months. Initially, everybody loved virtual meetings. They thought that was the greatest thing in the world. Over the last 6 months, they've kind of went like this as they look at what it's doing. And so now groups that were meeting exclusively virtually are doing a hybrid of meetings. I think that's what we're going to see for the next little bit, where there's both a virtual and an in-person component. But the current latest meeting planning studies and trends, which is just a couple of weeks old, says now that over 80% will be back in person if budget's approved to get to that. So that number was teetering down around 15 or 20% back at the first of the year. Late last year. But the first year it had gotten to about a 30%, and now it's to 80%. So yeah, we're seeing in-person come back strongly and the momentum there. And I do think there's a place for the hybrid meetings. I think we'll continue to see that. And fortunately, when we designed the building and how we've maintained it over these first 8 years, our 8th birthday was last week, so we're 8 years old now, is that from an infrastructure standpoint, we've got all the infrastructure in there to do virtual meetings. So that's the good news. We can certainly accommodate those easily. So, yeah, see, the trends are positive, though, but thank you.
Councilwoman Porterfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this presentation. You mentioned worker shortages. How is that having an impact on you all, and what positions are you all seeing shortages?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Council Lady. For us, since we were able to keep folks employed during the pandemic, we're not quite as short as some of our hotel folks are, but what I can tell you is that if you think about in the service sector for all of us, it's in those positions that are entry level up to the supervisor level primarily. And it's going to be, for us, for example, it's housekeeping, it's accounting, it's what we call setup, which is setting furniture, tables and chairs and staging, security, culinary, just any job in culinary right now is a challenge. Banquet servers has gotten a little bit better in the last week or so. We're seeing a pool of those folks come back in. So we're seeing it across all operate technology. We're still looking for a couple positions in technology. So across our spectrum of business at the convention center, really no department's untouched. And we've got entry-level and mid-level positions there. Now, the hotel community, and I'm in contact with them a lot, obviously, and they've got it across because they also had, during the time of the pandemic, had laid off a lot of managerial level positions. And so they're also looking at entry-level management positions, supervisors, and hourly staff primarily. But it's a tremendous shortage right now.
Any idea of the pay range? I know you're saying entry to mid-level. Any idea of the salary that those positions are paying?
Yeah, and let me speak primarily for like full-service hotels, us and those. I don't want to speak to maybe some limited service restaurants. I'm not as familiar with those, but more the ones downtown. They're in the $15 and up is the most entry-level type position as a general rule. Certainly going way above that. If you're a server or a bartender in one of those, it's astronomically above that number, what they're looking for. But you've got positions. I mean, we've got a couple of positions posted. They're certainly in the $60,000 range as well, and things. And moving up, we've got one higher than that. So it's across a pretty broad spectrum. And I think the beauty of our industry is my commercial here would be real quick. Is I got started in this business at 14 years old, cutting grass on Brick Church Pike at a hotel. And so there's a place, and Tom's got Councilman Druffel's got a very similar story. So I think folks can look at us as a career, not just a job for right now. And there's I think right now is a phenomenal opportunity to get in because the growth could be pretty quickly now as compared to what it's been in the past. So,
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Councilman. That's a lady.
And Mr. Starks, I'll ask the final question because I don't see any other hands. In case there's folks in the viewing audience who are intrigued by the Music City Center and want to know, can you explain, I know it's in this handout that you gave us, but folks watching can't see the handouts. Can you explain where your funding comes from?
Yeah, happy to, Council Lady. So our funding is a stream of, there were some taxes and fees that were adopted at the state level that Metro in turn then adopted as well, that were put in place just for the Music City Center. So if you stay at a hotel, there's a portion of the hotel tax that comes to us. That was all enacted legislation in the event that we were constructed and built. So once we've paid, for example, for the building, those go away and they disappear at that point. So specific fees or tax streams that were set up just Primarily, all are on visitors as a general rule, so unless you come spend a lot of night in hotels in Nashville. For example, there is a rental car fee, but if you're from Davidson County, you don't pay that regardless of where you are. And then a large portion of our revenues come just from operations. As I said, we had a $52 million budget prior to, operating revenues prior to what happened with the pandemic. So it's a combination of revenues, streams that were set up by state legislation just to capture things happening at the convention center is our funding mechanism.
So there's no funding that comes from Metro's operating budget for the Music City Center?
No, ma'am. It's quite the opposite. We've done quite well. I'll proudly say our board supported a number of initiatives of several administrations that are all very valuable to citizens of Nashville and to the convention center. So no, ma'am, we've not received. We have never received any funding from Metro, and certainly don't. Now, I will say, if any of the council has extra money they want to sell, we absolutely would take that. I'm not saying we'd pass on it, but no, ma'am, we don't receive any funding from Metro at all.
I can tell you now, we don't have any extra money.
Darn.
So we are coming up on time. We do have a couple extra minutes. I'm scanning the room, looking for hands.
No.
Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Starks
Thank
and
you
Ms.
very much.
Runyon. Really appreciate your time.